Hi everyone, my name is James. Welcome to episode 4 of Oh My Malware. This is a channel where we grab real malware samples and we run them, just as if users would have received them via phishing email or any other delivery method. And the main goal is to check what coverage we would get if we were running Elastic Security with the Elastic Defend integration for Elastic Agent, which provides endpoint detection and response capabilities. In this episode, we'll be looking at a recent sample of QBot or CatBot. QBot itself as a malware family has been around since about 2007. Again, it's very financially motivated, tries and steals financial information of various different sorts and forms. This particular sample is now being delivered via a malicious OneNote document sent to users via a phishing email. So we'll be looking at that today from the actual OneNote document all the way through the full execution flow of the sample. Let's go ahead and start that. I always like looking at the VirusTotal page of sample we'll be executing, and I always link the VirusTotal link itself from the ohmymalware.com website, which is linked in the specific episodes card. If you're new to this channel, we always run the sample simultaneously on two different machines. One is a machine running the Elastic Defend integration in detection only mode. So everything is turned on, but in detection only mode. So nothing is actually prevented. This is to see the sort of the full execution flow and do real dynamic analysis on that sample. The other machine is pretty much the exact opposite. Everything is on in prevention mode. So what you typically find in a production context. So we can see what would actually prevent from the very start if someone did receive this malicious file via this OneNote document. So I'm going to go ahead and run these samples. So we'll extract them first. That's not what I want. Let's do that again. Kind of on autopilot sometimes, and this is the box I was waiting for. So that's the first one. This is the prevention machine. And what I'll do is add a file name that was distributed in the phishing email over here. So you can see it is a OneNote file. And let's go ahead. So once this starts to run, I've actually never used OneNote before on these images, so that's why we're getting all the entry stuff. Okay, so let's hit the open button. And now the malware should be doing its thing. So we got on the prevention machine, looks like it already couldn't run because we prevented something, which is good. Detection only machine, it is running. So we heard you have 7 alerts being fired off via the Elastic Defend integration. So as usual, what I typically like to do is wait about 10 minutes or so. So the sample can run. We'll let any SIM rules run on their schedules, and then we're able to see what we'll detect. So I'm going to cut the video here, and I'll be back in about 10 minutes. Okay, so it's actually been a bit longer than 10 minutes. I was noticing that things kept coming up, so I let it run a bit longer. But here we are within Elastic now. So we have 21 alerts total for both machines. As usual, what I like to do is start off with the detection machine first. So let me filter out that prevention machine. So we had 20 alerts when it comes to detections. You can see there's a significant amount which are endpoint based. So all these behavior detection alert, the threat detection, memory alerts, those are all endpoint based. And then we have a couple of SIM based rules as well. Now remember, we don't do any reverse engineering here or static analysis. So if anyone wants sort of a in-depth report about this particular sample, I will link a really well put together blog post by Total, which is an MDR provider. And I'll put that in the Discord server, the specific channel for this episode. So after every episode, if you haven't joined our Discord server yet, there's a channel per episode where we can discuss anything about the episode itself or any of the outcomes. So I'll link to that report there so you can take a look at anything more in depth that you might want to see. So let's take a look. So the first alert we have, let me zoom in a bit more. The title is very indicative to behavior we're expected to see, right? So we had that being picked up. So malicious behavior detection alert, suspicious Microsoft OneNote child process. And this ran because we ran OneNote, and then OneNote calls a specific HTA file. So we're going to take a look at that. So let's take a look at the details here. I've already turned off these machines, so that's why you see them as unenrolled here. So don't worry too much about that. But this rule specifically, if we look at the description, it says it's trying to identify a suspicious child process of OneNote. This may indicate an attempt to execute malicious embedded objects. So OneNote can have embedded objects. In this case, it's an HTA file which uses Mishta, or however you pronounce it, MSHTA. I like to say Mishta, which is a very common living of the land binary, which allows you to load up those HTA files. And then that HTA file actually loads up a couple of different scripts. For the sake of more detail here, let's take a look at the process arguments. Yeah, so you can see it tried to invoke, or not tried, it did successfully invoke Mishta, calling this specific embedded attachment.hta. That report from Todo that I mentioned actually goes into the contents of that. So if you want to take a look at the actual in-depth contents of the file decoded, you'll be able to see that. Another thing I'll highlight here is I always like reminding everyone of this feature, this related alerts by process ancestry. Again, because we are not in a production context, for these episodes, very specific. We have two machines, one sample, we run them, and then we run it, and then we turn off the machines. But if you were in a real security operations team, you're gonna have way more alerts than this. You're gonna have different data sources and stuff. So being able to see which alerts are all related is extremely powerful and useful, right? So you can see here all those other 20 alerts are all related to each other because of the process ancestry. So very, very handy to have. In our case, obviously we're going to go through them all, but I always like emphasizing this. Okay, so that was the first one. Pretty clear that what it did and why that was detected. Let's take a quick look at the event analyzer, just in case. Whoa, this is pretty extensive. So you can see what we expect: OneNote launching Mishta, a couple of registry changes, a couple of library calls, and they might or might not be related. Depends. We can take a look at all the detail if we wanted to, but yeah, what you typically expect to see from these kind of calls. But then you can see. We'll get into the detail of all the alerts, but there's an invocation of run DLL32, which further invokes AT broker, which and then seems to do a bunch of stuff, which is looks at a very high level overview, very typical of like discovery techniques and enumeration and that sort of stuff. Let's keep scrolling to the left here. Oh, it looks like curl was actually used as well. So let's keep looking at those alerts, but this OneNote file does a lot. I wouldn't want to see this running. Let's take a look. So closing analyzer, and then the next thing is, here's a curl-based alert. Ingress tool transfer via curl. So let's take a look here. I always like to read through the descriptions in case you're not too familiar. So this rule is trying to identify downloads of remote content using Windows curl executable. This tactic may be indicative of malicious activity where malware is downloading second stage payloads using built-in Windows programs. So this is probably exactly what happened here. Again, let's take a look at the process arguments. Okay, so it looks like curl was used to download this, well, what's labeled as 121.png from this specific URL. 77.75.230.128. There's an IOC for you right there, and it's the file path is 1825.dat, and it looks like it created that file. And then we have another alert here for suspicious Windows script interpreter child process. I'm assuming that HTA file is going to call things like WScript and others. And we can see here it invoked run DLR32. We actually saw that from the event analyzer. So you can see, yeah, now run DLR32 is running that 121.png file, which is weird, right? I mean, this is probably a DLL masquerading as a PNG or just labeled as a PNG. Run DLL32 doesn't run PNG files, which are images, with an argument of wind. Very interesting argument over there. So we can see that's what run DLL32 is doing. And then we have run DLL32 with unusual arguments. This is probably related to just that. Just to confirm, right? Yep, the same arguments. It is unusual, that wind over there with 121.png. Remember, if you want to take a look at sort of the detection logic, this is all available on our public GitHub repository, and I always link the specific rule syntax from the ohmymalware.com website for the episode card. So you don't have to go and fish it out yourselves. Just click on the alert details button within the episode card on the webpage, and you'll be taken straight to this alert, just to look at the logic there. Okay, and then we have library load of a file written by a signed binary proxy. Let's take a look here. Yeah, so again, looking at the description, this identifies the image load of a DLL file written or modified by a signed Microsoft binary proxy such as Mishda, certrec, or certutil. Adversaries may bypass processes and or signature-based defenses by proxying execution of malicious content with signed binaries. So we know this happened, right? We saw that in previous rules. Again, I'm going to take a look at the... Yeah, so we know both of these signed processes got invoked via Mishda. We saw that in the graphical analyzer. Yeah, very, very clear why that happened here. And you can see all the other metadata too, if we wanted to. Remember, right, these are all endpoint-based detections so far. So very good coverage, I must say. Kudos to the Security Labs team. I'm always impressed by everything that they do. Can't say enough good stuff about them. Next one is run DLR32 or registry service, loads dropped executable. We know why this triggered, right? That 121.png invocation there. But just to make sure, XT. Yeah, so file extension, PNG. We have all the DLL information there. And yeah, we know that it loaded it up. It's cool, right? Because you can see the entropy, you can see the header bytes. Really, really useful information sometimes to do some further analysis and investigation. And then we have yet another behavior detection alert, which is unusual DLL extension loaded by run DLR32. And again, we can pretty much know why this triggered, right? PNG is not a DLL extension, even though it is a DLL. We always include, of course, the original file name. So if we look here, so we can see, I'm filtering for the wrong stuff. Ignore me. Yes, So you can see this is the DLL path. So we know it's DLL because of the headers and everything else, right? And the original file name is not PNG. Very common masquerading technique, right? Trying to trick people thinking, oh, this is just a safe little PNG file, 121.png. But in actual fact, it's DLL. So very, very indicative of why this triggered. And then we get into some shellcode injection alerts. So we have 4 alerts for shellcode injection. This is because we look at different, sometimes the code runs out of different memory regions, and we look at unique key identifiers for those, which is why we see 4. So if it does a couple of different things, we'll pick them up individually. And you can see one of the things is also a signature-based memory threat detection alert. So we run Yara signatures for memory detections as well. Again, these signatures are all available for you to view and look at. Let's take a look at some of these shellcode injection alerts here. So we look for a bunch of different things here. Things like unbacked code in memory, we process hollowing, process ghosting, a bunch of other memory and shellcode injection techniques. I always like to look at we collect the strings in that particular memory region. So we don't do a memory dump, but we collect a lot of information about what was in those memory regions. So all the strings, sometimes there's very indicative IOCs here, something you can search for. In this case, nothing too particular that I can see, at least offhand. But yeah, there's so much information that we gather from the memory regions, apart from just the strings. Yeah, this was the actual command line that invoked it. So it's now running in memory, it seems, right? Again, trying to probably evade by running in memory. And we get a bunch of other detail. And you can see this is unbacked. Oh, and there's also you can see some disassembly here as well. So those are probably all going to be similar. I'll just highlight one more thing from the Cygnus memory threat detection alerts. We do actually show you where or what matched from the signature. So filter for a field called matches. So these are the, where within the memory region there was a match. I'm not going to stay decoding these for now, but if anyone was curious and wanted to, this is what matched our signature, basically. Okay, and now we move on. There were some similar triggered here. If you remember when we opened up the graphical analyzer, we saw a lot of things like the net command, root, arp, ipconfig. So typically very indicative of someone doing discovery, enumeration, trying to get as much info about the machine or network that they've just infiltrated. So let's take a look at this one here. So net.exe ran netview via atbroker, which we know was running from that memory process. Netview, very typical to enumerate things like connected printers, drives, that sort of stuff. Here's an example where we include these investigation guides. So if you're not too familiar, you can follow these guides. Take a look at some of the other system information discovery via Windows command shell. So you can see CMD is running set, which, yeah, this is typically showing environment variables and some other stuff. So very, very typical enumeration of trust, remote system discovery commands. So these are all related to, discovery techniques, ARP cache here, and looking what's connected via the ARP table, and then checking if it's joined to any domains or anything like that. Very, very typical stuff. We had a couple of more shellcode injection alerts, very similar, but then we see sort of an attempt at persistence, right? Very, very typical as well. Registry keys being created for persistent. So you can see here the technique is actually boot or logon or start execution, and the sub technique is registry run keys, and you can see it created this particular registry run key via atbroker.exe. And we have similar detection from the endpoint side, right? So this was the SIM rule and this was the endpoint rule. So 20 alerts for this QBot sample here via Onenote. Pretty extensive, great coverage, and yeah, a lot of defense in depth happening. So we had a lot of behaviors from the endpoint. If none of these protections were on, so if you did have everything in detection only mode, hopefully you might have had memory thread detections on, would have stopped there. If you didn't, then unfortunately, like we saw here, it would have been able to run. You would have been able to identify that things are going on with the SIM rules and the other rules. But if we had to compare now to the prevention host, I don't think we're going to see much at all here. Yeah, there's really one alert because we prevented that behavior from the very, very start. So as soon as we identified Onenote trying to load up that HTA file via Mishta, we killed the process, and it wasn't able to do anything else. So if we what I like to do is highlight the responses field here. So we do capture what we killed. So you can see kill process, it was successful, and we killed mishta.exe. And in case you're wondering what this entity ID is here, so we create unique hashes of every single process that runs, right? So we can identify a unique invocation of a specific process at a specific time. We never rely on just the process ID because these are not unique to processes. These get reused, of course. This allows us to make sure we're killing the right process, and you can reference it at any point in time again. It also allows us to build that graphical analyzer view. So we do rely a lot on that entity ID over there. And yeah, that brings us to the end of episode 4 of Oh My Malware. This was a fun one, very recent as well, very top of mind. So if you are part of a security operations team, this might be running around your networks. Just in case, go look for it with whatever tool you have available to you. If you are enjoying this content, I would really, really appreciate if you liked and subscribed to the channel. It really helps out with reach and making sure that this gets to the right people. Once again, I will link that blog post from Total from the Discord server, and there's everything else you can get from the ohmymalware.com website. So the actual event data, this cluster to look around, so on and so forth. But this was great. Until next time, thanks everyone, and stay safe.